the lumberyard caught on fire?
Did.
I think he sprayed the school.
One building.
That would have been,
Well,
gosh, when was that?
So it was between 55 and 60 sometime,
Our
I'd say.
kids were in school.
Well, it had to be in between 60 and
I've been in the
65.
60s.
Yeah.
But
That was
before
Carl
that-
Schultz's lumberyard. All I
Yeah.
remember, we looked out and saw a great
Oh,
big black
everybody was
smoke.
over there.
That was pretty close to your place.
we really didn't have any
Big
tragedies.
tragedies.
No, I don't, when our next door neighbor, Mr. Hunt, was working out at the school on West National, and a week or two before, Pepsi-Cola came along and gave a metal police statue for people to, or for schools to put out in the center of the road to slow down traffic. It was a miniature metal. You remember
I
seeing?
think I do. So
You remember seeing
that?
anything like that, or maybe
Well, did they kind of have a hand
Yeah.
up or,
slow?
yeah?
And
I don't know
and
where I've
Mr.
seen
Hunt
it.
lived next door, and of course we were friends, and they were raising two of their grandchildren whose their daughter had died, and they took them to raise. But anyway, Mr. Hunt was working out there at the school, and his one duty was to put that thing out every morning to slow up traffic in case that's what the sign was for. And he was put that out there one morning, and a car hit him out there and killed him outright.
Oh, God.
No, I never heard that.
And
That
I
was
wa-
in front of Morton High School.
Yeah, I went out there, and there Mr. Hunt lay dead, laying on the floor, bleeding through his face and head.
Oh,
And then I must have picked him up and put him in the ambulance right away. We didn't used to have to take him into the coroner's office like they do now. There wasn't any emergency ambulance then. I was the ambulance then, see?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, who went down there to tell Mrs. Hunt? I guess it was, well, I remember. And anyway, well, other people were killed. Of course, we went out on several fatal accidents out on the highway, you know. For 21 years we ran the ambulance, and that would come all hours of the day and night. That would have, it's a wonder I didn't get killed out on the highway, because I didn't have the proper lights in my ambulance at that time, and no equipment. All I had to offer was transportation. I wasn't trained like they are today, you know. And you didn't have the equipment you had. I mean, you went out with a backboard, and that was about it. Maybe a tourniquet, and maybe a
well, see, now they have the
Oh.
emergency units that go
oh, they can hook you up and give you an IV on it going in now.
Right. Almost like being in a hospital
Well,
once
sure,
they get
and
there.
they're in touch with the emergency
Hospital.
department all the way in.
Yeah.
And they can register their heartbeat into the hospital right from the ambulance.
Do you remember any of the mayor's names?
Oh, Carl Borchers, Bob Reichert, Claude Sensman, Henry Brushman, Ben Armstrong, others. When we first came here, Claude Sensman lived across the street where the United Methodist Church is located today. There was a little house there they tore down for that church. And he was the mayor a couple terms. And then fell the name of Ed Pars.
I've heard that name.
Ed Pars. And then Carl Borchers, brother to Harry. Remember them? Remember any Borchers?
I've heard the Borchers, yeah.
Yeah.
One of them used to live across from Cedar Park there in that little white house.
Well, Harry lived
Right.
by the funeral
Oh.
home, didn't
Harry lived 2 doors up from me,
he? Yeah.
Yeah.
and Carl lived across the street from the cigar house, from the park.
Cedar Park, yeah.
And he was mayor. He was postmaster when we came. And Now the mayors after Henry Brussman. Henry Brussman was mayor when the village turned into a city. They
It's about 58.
he was the mayor then because he started the committee. They had an election to elect a charter committee, and there were about 20 people. There were 12 to be elected, and there were about 22 that consented to run for it. Basil Theodorus, you remember the
Yeah,
Theodorus?
Chicken man.
place.
He asked me if I would consent to be on the ballot, and I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know anything about a city charter, you know. I don't know who else did. But anyway, Walter Miranda got the most votes. Byron was second and I was third.
Mayor?
Huh?
Mayor?
No, for to write the
Charter.
Write the city
charter committee.
Yeah, for
Oh,
the city charter.
oh, for heaven's sake.
Charter form of government.
Huh? And not hard, but Jim Gilmer, Ben Armstrong, no, not Ben, Orpha, Ben's wife. She was the only lady on it. Albert Nichols was on it. Other people that are deceased now, but we had a brother from Dayton who was our advisor, and he probably is the one that really wrote the charter. I mean, he would come out and he was our advisor, you know, paid advisor. The city paid him, I guess. He just died recently. Brother Rose was his name. But anyway, I've got a picture of the 12 of us, and he was in it. Father Ofterheide was one of them.
Well, that'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting picture to have, or
Yeah,
a copy of it.
Yeah, if we could maybe copy
I'll try to
that.
find that.
If you run across it, well, let me
Now
know.
that was about, I tell you, Byron left here in '56 and was 2 years as county superintendent, and he went to the State Department then in Columbus, and he had to, well, did he resign while he was in, he had to move to Columbus, and he couldn't meet with us after that. So that would have been, the charter was written about 56 or 7 in there.
I'd say that's about right.
And we
because-
became a city then in about 58.
58, that's right. That's
They,
what I remembered.
They had an election on the charter committee, and then the charter presented, the committee presented the charter to the voters, and they voted to accept it. And up until 3 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, when they dummies couldn't elect a mayor because of political, they stayed up all night trying to elect a mayor and never could do it. Then they made a change in the charter for the mayor to run independently. I mean, before we had it in the charter to elect a mayor out of the council, out of the council,
Yeah,
and the council would elect their own mayor
Yeah.
to
yeah.
preside. Really, is what it meant. See. But they couldn't, the dummies couldn't even do that. The
Yeah,
Democrats would vote for a Democrat and the Republicans
They
would vote,
could never
and the
come out
council's,
as high.
and the
Come out-
council's supposed to be non-political, see?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But, so now then we've got a lady mayor that,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's cute.
She's cute.
That's about what,
what else you gonna say about her?
well, that's about it. What are you gonna say about her?
Nothing. I'll keep my mouth shut.
I was gonna turn this off.
She's a good PR person, but whether
yeah.
you agree with
Do you-
them.
Do you remember where the first post office was when you came back?
Yeah. Up in the north end of the Oddfellows building on the ground floor.
Okay.
That's where it was when we
That's where-
came, because
when we
I
came,
knocked
too.
over the post office box when
Yeah,
I was pulling up
she
there.
drove in there one day to.
What'd you hit?
The
But
post
that,
office
you know, the
box.
outside thing where you put your mail in.
Was there
those
one out
big
there?
old boxes.
Yeah.
And
There was
I
one
hit
out
it.
there on the
Yes, I felt like 2 cents.
And then, was it ever
Ray Beverly was the Carl Borchers was the postmaster then, when we
Mhm.
came to town. Then Ray Beverly was.
I don't even
Remember Ray Beverly?
that.
No.
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 he was a postmaster, and then when they moved over to the new building, I guess it must have been Mrs. Her son's in the
Or, well, her,
Bittner.
wasn't her dad,
Bittner.
her dad, her
no,
husband.
Her husband.
no,
No.
Elsie Bittner was the postmaster.
Oh, I thought she took over after he died.
No, Ray. She took over after Ray Beverly.
Oh.
Okay.
Her husband wasn't well at all. He never could work.
Oh.
He was a kind of a semi-invalid.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I thought he was postmaster and she took over.
Well, now, it wasn't the post office at one time in the old administrative building up here where the project was? Right there about where the new post office is?
Yeah, they moved. They moved out of that corner where you hit the box, and they moved over into what used to be the administration building for the housing project.
Yeah.
And that was located similar to where it is
Yeah,
now.
about where it is now, right.
Yeah.
Well, see, I remember when we first came here, we lived over there on a Moore place off of Helke. And we didn't have mail delivery. They didn't have,
No.
That was Victor
No.
2
in
plat.
50,
was built.
55, they weren't, because I remember we
In
moved out.
55.
We moved out here in December, and it was getting close to Christmas. And Susie was just a baby, and I didn't have a car then. We didn't have 2 cars, you know. And I remember the welcome wagon lady called on me, and she mailed my
You know who that welcome wagon lady was? It was Art Van Etta's wife. At one time.
yeah,
And she died, you know.
yeah. But she took my Christmas cards and mailed them for me. I remember that, because it was getting so close to Christmas. And
They used our front porch for kind of a substation for the carrier.
I was thinking it was Fran Gillespie.
Fran Gillespie? No, there was a Eldon Gillespie was the first mail carrier that came to our
I
house.
mean that she was with the welcome wagon.
Oh, well, that could have been. I don't know
I'm
that.
not sure about
Frances would have been.
it. Then she was a nurse later, wasn't she?
She worked for the doctor's office
Yeah.
down here. She wasn't a nurse, but she worked in the office then.
That's
All
what
right,
I
now
think it
then,
was.
the post office where it is now isn't exactly the same place because they had to build a new one and still leave the old one in operation, see? So it's in that it was in that vicinity.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was probably
Yeah.
west of where they
Now
built the new
that area was a government housing project. Do you remember that?
one. Yeah, but
Was
can
that
you
was that
tell
here then when?
can you tell me the reason why it was why there was a government housing project here?
Well, so many people came in from the Northwest Airlines to modify airplanes up at the airport during the war, and this was a temporary housing. The government built those.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
That's where our influx of our school went from 500 kids to 1,000,
Yeah,
and they didn't have room to put them, and that's when they built Vandalia Elementary. And then they built Merlin Heights, and then they built Dammit and Stone Quarry and the new high school. But they had double stations here at one time. You remember that?
yeah.
Kids were just going half days
Half
when we
days.
moved here.
Didn't have,
We
they
came
couldn't
here in
get
55.
they couldn't get ready for them quicker.
It grew too fast.
And
Yeah,
that's when the project. And you know a lot of those good people that came in here. A lot of them stayed.
Oh,
Bought
yeah.
homes up there on Skyview Drive after they were built there in
Right.
42.
Right.
I don't know.
Here, a lot of them.
Okay, so why was
Built
it
here.
built? It was built for who was doing the modification?
Northwest Airlines
Oh, okay.
out of Minneapolis.
They were
They
converting
were hired by the
commercial
government to convert commercial airplanes into army transports.
Okay.
I never knew that.
No, I didn't
Well, you
either.
see, you can't
Well, see,
live.
we learned something. See, you said you didn't what you have to say. See?
And of course, the location we know was where the new apartments are on the corner.
Well, then they had one up north too, you know.
No, I didn't know
Government
that.
project.
I didn't know that.
Up where the old airport entrance was. Up north of town, there where the air show is now.
Oh, did they?
It was
People
a housing
lived
project.
there?
They had very similar to this up here. Maybe it wasn't quite as many, but there was a government housing up there that
Oh,
was similar to this.
I didn't know that. Okay, and of course we wanted to know where it was located. We know where it was.
Les Overfield lived up there. Mrs. Fenners, Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Allen lived up there. Oh, I can name you a lot of
Well,
people.
didn't Miss Eby run it? Wasn't she the rental agent or something?
She had a lot to do with the rentals of those government apartments.
It ran a little bazaar.
Yeah.
She and
Well, that was
Albert.
before the bazaar.
Yeah, Miss Eby and
Miss Albert.
Miss Albert.
Sarah Albert.
Yeah.
Edith Eby.
What can you tell me about Air Products, which is now Delco Chassis?
Came in, is it?
I think so.
Is that what it's called?
I think on the west end it's Delco Chassis. On the east end it's
Three fellas were the main ones that started that building, Air Products. And that just started about the time that we landed here. And Mr. Morris, Doc Smith's second wife, her husband, name of Morris, was one of the three men that were at the head of this first Air Products. The other two was Mac, lived down on Peters and Little York Road in that house that sits there in the woods. He was flying an airplane down in Indiana, and he had pains in his chest, and he landed in a cornfield, walked up to the farmhouse and died in the living room. And he was two of them. Then the other man was the head man. He was killed, and his stenographer was with him coming home from New York out here between Springfield and Columbus one Saturday evening about 5 o'clock. They crashed out there in a Cessna plane, and he was killed. Mr. Morris died of form of leukemia. No, what's this cancer that you get in your lymph glands?
lymphatic cancer. Yeah, lymphatic, isn't it? Lymphatic cancer.
Lymphomia.
Lymphomia, or it's something to do with the lymph system. Yeah,
And
Leukemia is your blood, isn't it?
yeah. Mr. Morris, Doc Smith.
Well, is there anybody around that you think now that would know very much about early Air Products?
I worked there, but I worked there the last 3 years that it was in operation. So, you know.
Somebody called here one day and wanted to know.
Yeah, there's been two questions I've been asked. The history of Aero Products and the history of Lear.
Lear was from Belt. He was up there across the street where the Aero Products used to use for their prop test. Remember that building? Well, that building's still there, isn't it?
That old brick building?
Yeah.
Yeah, right across from their entryway into their south parking lot. Yeah.
Now that's where Lear was at one time.
Okay.
And then he moved to Michigan then, didn't he?
I think. I'm not sure.
But he builds
Lear jets.
Lear jets.
Yeah. A corporate jet.
That's
what Stormer down here was killed in. The school teacher's husband.
Well, yeah, I was. Well,
What was his name?
Stormont.
I went down to West Virginia. What's the name of that town where we went and got those 5 bodies? They were working for. Stormont was a mechanic for what company in Dayton that kept those planes up here at the field?
Mead Corporation.
Mead Corporation,
the paper corporation, or was it NCR?
They had a plane down at, what's the name in West Virginia, right out of Charleston, pretty good sized town. Wasn't Charleston. It was north of Charleston.
Beckley, West Virginia? No.
But anyway, they had a plane down there, and Stormont, and there were 4 or 5 fellows went down there. One pilot they had a pilot that they were going to try to get that plane off the ground down there and get it back here, and then they went down there to get it. And it was a bad morning, and they got down there ready to land, and Tar or whoever the airport there told them if they'd wait a while they'd sand the runway for them. But they thought they could get down without sanding the runway. And they didn't hit the runway at the farthest end that they could have hit it. they hit it down farther down than what they should have,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't lift it off before they went into the trees, see, and burnt.
Oh, Lord, that was a mess.
And I called down at Meade to see, I had gotten a call from Mrs. Stormont or the family, and I called Meade that morning or that day, sometime during the day, to see what arrangements had been made about getting those bodies out of West Virginia. I told him that I had one family to call me, and I was interested in knowing what the procedure was going to be. And they didn't know either. And they called back later in the day and asked me if I would take the responsibility of getting all 5 bodies back. And that they would, I said, well, you know, really, it's not my responsibility to get those bodies back here. But then I says, it's your responsibility, you know. And so, but they said, well, you go ahead and hire anything you need to hire, and we'll pay you. So I went up, and at that time we hired a DC-3. Well, would it have been a DC-3?
Yeah, if it was a twin engine,
But
tricycle landing gear.
But it didn't. It was a cargo type.
Yeah. Well,
And-
it was a C-47 according to the Army, or an R-4D according to
Yeah.
the Navy.
And there was a funeral home down there. I'll come up with this town pretty soon. Parkersburg is where it was. And he had all 5 bodies out at the airport waiting on me to come down there. And he had them taken care of well, had them wrapped all up in sheets and all. And we loaded those 5 bodies up. He was at the airport with help, and went down there, and we loaded those 5 bodies up, put them back in the cargo space, whatever, and flew back here at the airport. We I hauled all 5 of them back down in my garage. And then called funeral homes that had one from Xenia, one from Tip, one from Eaton or someplace, and I kept Mr. Stormont. But 2 fellows from right field came out who were trained to identify bodies that weren't
Identifiable, so to speak.
Yeah.
Probably did it by dental record.
That's right. Doc Bone came with a record of Mr. Stormont. And did you know him? Do you remember? You don't remember Mr. Stormont.
Barely.
Well, he had the boy in Scouts.
I had his son in the Boy Scout troop.
So
About,
he just,
He's a minister. The
Is
boy that's a boy.
is he?